about your film, he said, we were all chatting afterwards, me and some friends, and we felt that you've given us so much pleasure over the years. We don't like to see you struggle. And so that really was, again, very serendipitous and also karma. So it's true what you say. It was the community. I called PC. I said, let me ask PC, because she's such a wonderful friend to me and such a supporter of mine for the longest time. And she said, babe, I'm not a singer anymore. I don't do this. And I said, oh, Jalia, it'll be fun. It's for my end titles. I was just showing them that I'm on a WhatsApp group with Mira Nair and Deepa Mehta as well. And the three of us were always, giving each other love and support and proper Punjabi galiyan,
Okay, hi, good evening, both of you. Looking very pretty, and I think I can see the power duo that you both are. So tell me, how did Christmas karma came into place? How did this karma happen?
So I wanted to make a Christmas film because I grew up with Christmas in England. That was such a big deal for me. And I love Frank Capra's film, It's a Wonderful Life. And I wanted to make a film that made me feel like that. So I took Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol because that inspired Frank Capra, wrote my script, based it on a Ugandan Asian person who I knew who'd come to Britain as a refugee around Christmas time and was always a bit grinchy around us. I thought this is a very clever way of showing Scrooge today. And by showing a man who'd come as a refugee, had a hostile reception, and turned to money to give him status. And then when I tried to get the film financed, I struggled. And I was in Cannes, and I was walking along the Croisette, and these two Indian women started walking. They were walking towards me, and I could see them going, it's Gurinder Chadha, it's Gurinder Chadha. So I smiled and I stopped and I said, hi, would you like a selfie? They said, yes, please. So did a selfie, but instead of walking away, I said, tell me what you do. And Anushka said, well, I founded a studio called Civic Studios, and we make social impact films. So for me, immediately, it was like, oh my God, you need to read my script. So I sent her the script. So it was very serendipitous.
Moral of the story, never be afraid to fangirl. Our icon.
Or take a selfie with a
Or
person
take
you
a
admire.
selfie, exactly. Yeah.
You never know where you'll land up.
And it was lovely to have that meeting because for me, growing up, Gurinder and her films have been such a big influence. I think for a lot of Indian women, being able to see ourselves on a screen that big and in a film that broke so many barriers, it meant a lot to meet her, but it has been such a privilege and honor to work with her on this project and learn from her process. I've always seen it from the outside as an audience member, but now to see it from this side. And I think for us, really a key reason to take up the film is, the studio, everything we do is social impact driven. And this project is, at its heart, really is a story that talks about immigration and the challenges around that and what it means to not let trauma define you. So for us, it was important to support that project, but also to support her. I think it was her karma because I was just giving back to all that she's given us over the years.
But we rarely see women producers. There is a lot of chatter in Bollywood about the female gaze and everything, and we see a lot more technicians, women technicians on set. But women producers are still a growing breed. So we have a very powerful women director, and we have now a very young and dynamic young producer. So how did the professional collaboration sort of come about? And how was it to be on the set with two very strong women?
Well, from my part, what was brilliant was that Anushka was very visionary. She had an absolute clear sense of purpose of what kind of films she wanted to support and how to support them. And so from my perspective, it was nothing but a pleasure to work with another Indian woman in this capacity. But it was so rare for me to work in this way. So I also was very mindful of her obligations to social responsibility, and politics, given she has a political background. So I found those comments and thoughts on the script and on the film valuable. But also coming from India, that was also a good perspective for me because, she had a slightly different perspective to myself. But at the same time, I was trying to make films that will work in India as well as around the world. And I think that having a British Indian woman and an Indian woman from India who's now living in Britain, that was a great synergy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and I
Anushka, what
think that
about you?
when
I mean,
directors,
Gurinder is a name and a brand in herself. So I'm sure there were the pros and the cons. So how did you manage with all that? And so many stars in the film.
no cons from our side really, because and I mean that because I think exactly the reason Gurinder said, I think that it's quite rare actually when director, producers, investors, everybody on the film come from a very similar politics and similar life experiences in a way. So you see the goal in a very unified form. And Gurinder's record and craft and her track means that nobody else needs to or should interfere creatively. So I think everybody else really took a backseat wherever there was input to give. I think, we shared it and she was very open-minded about all of it. So it at no point I think were there any severe disagreements on anything. And I think her politics and art are very clear. So everyone signing up to the film knew what to expect.
My only demand was that she should be an extra. So so she is an extra in the film, and I didn't know at the time she was pregnant, but her child is now also an extra in the film.
I was 2 months pregnant and she said, "Oh, cameo." I said, "Of course, what an honor to do a cameo in a Gurinder Chadha film." I didn't realize it's a 12-hour Bhangra shoot. But yeah.
There are rumors about the film that this is crowd-funded by many other global Indians. How much truth is in that sentiment?
So what happened was Anushka came on board, my UK distributor came on board, and also I had the UK tax credit. And so I had the majority of finance, but I was struggling to get the last 2 million, the last section. And Christmas was approaching, and I had been wanting to shoot during Christmas so I could have all the production value, because I would never be able to recreate that. And I hadn't been able to manage that. And so in December, I had been asked by Sunil Sheth, who was my family lawyer, who was retired, who does a lot of charity work. He asked me to read a poem for one of his charities in the church in Piccadilly. And I went along and I was super depressed because everywhere I looked, the Christmas lights were up, and I was like, oh, I should be shooting. Anyway, I read the poem. They had a raffle, but they didn't have many prizes. So I offered a prize as a walk-on part in my next film. And so they sold lots of tickets. Everyone was happy. And then Sunil came up to me after and said, "Tell me about the film." I told him the story. He said, "Oh, it's this migrant story." I said, "Yeah." And he went, "And why aren't you making it?" And I said, "Well, I'm short of £2 million, Sunil." And he went, "Oh, it's like that, is it?" I said, "Yeah, what a shame. I should be shooting at Christmas and I just can't." And he walked away, but the next day he called me and he said, about your film. He said, we were all chatting afterwards, me and some friends, and we felt that you've given us so much pleasure over the years. We don't like to see you struggle. So we've all put our hands in our pockets and I've got your 2 million, go and make your film. And the next day I booked a helicopter shoot and I shot all over London and took all the lights. And so that really was, again, very serendipitous and also karma, and so it's true what you say. It was the community and Indians in the end that have helped me make this film.
And I really want to know what phone calls were made by either Anushka or Gurinder. You that got PC singing George Michael's song and convincing her to do it in Hindi. I want to know, I want to be a fly on the wall for that conversation.
We have to say one thing before Gurinder explains how she did this. We were on set, and I remember telling Gurinder during one of the breaks that, it's important to have a big Indian singer because it'll help the saleability and marketability film in India. And we were just throwing around some names, PC. I hadn't even thought as big as PC. And next break, which was maybe like an hour or so later, she had thought of PC, called PC, got pretty much like a positive signal. This was all like, I think, in an hour's span. So that's all her magic.
What happened was I had a meeting with the George Michael estate in England, and they said, "Oh, what are you doing now?" And I said, "Oh, I'm making a Christmas film." And they said, "Oh, if it's a Christmas film, why aren't you using Last Christmas?" And I said, "Well, because I don't have £250,000 to give you." And they said, "Well, if you're nice to us, we might give it to you." And they said, "Why don't you do something different? Why don't you do a Bollywood version?" And I said, "You mean Hindi version?" And they said, "Yeah, do something different. George Michael would love it." So it was actually them who had the idea. So once they said that, I went and wrote some very cod Hindi lyrics, I must say, and then I called PC. I said, "Let me ask PC," because she's such a wonderful friend to me and such a supporter of mine for the longest time. And I called her and she said, "Babe, I'm not a singer anymore. I don't do this. And I said, "Oh, chal yaar, it'll be fun. It's for my end titles. And, it's the end of the movie and we're all going to sing along with you and all this." And so I had to persuade her, but she was in London. And so she came to the studio. And then I also called Anushka Shankar. She said, "Come on, Gurinder, let me help you. Let me support you." So between them, like I had all these women coming and it was just beautiful. And then she came that day and Priyanka was like, "Oh my God, you're going to get me into trouble, Gurinder." And I said, "Look, it sounds great. It's fun. Think of George Michael because he's going to love it." And that's what happened. And so I'm in there with her. My dog is in there with, that's my dog in the film. She's cuddling my dog. And we ended up with such a beautiful version that the George Michael estate absolutely loved. And a lot of people, have really loved it. And I just, it really was in the spirit of friendship and supporting another Indian woman that Priyanka came forward and did that. And so I'm super grateful to her for it.
It takes a village. Everybody came together, and we have this new Hindi version of the song. And I'm sure Christmas approaching, it will be on the airwaves and everywhere.
Well, I think it's for a moment we can say things are a struggle for us as women, definitely. But it's also a lovely story that women come together like this to support each other. And I was just showing them that I'm on a WhatsApp group with Meera Nair and Deepa Mehta as well. And the three of us were always, giving each other love and support and proper Punjabi galiyan. So this is the thing that I'm loving now, is this idea of camaraderie with women who are all doing amazing things in their own rights, but are coming together to support each other. I think that's definitely something to be celebrated.
And which also ties in with the film, because even on the surface it's a feel good Christmas film, but it talks about slightly sadder themes of Indians being expelled from Uganda and facing, and when we are away from home there is a homesickness to us and we keep striving for something or the other. So how did you come up with that? Because Christmas films are usually very feel good, but here we're
Well,
talking
this
about a
is also
larger
feel good. This is also feel good. The thing is that, look, when you come from my unique background, someone like me, what do I carry with me? I carry migration and the struggles of my ancestors with me. My grandparents were from Jhelum and Rawalpindi, and in partition, they moved. Then they went to Africa, and then from Africa, where my parents were born, came to Britain. And all, lots of different experiences of movement and homeland. And I mean, in India, I actually don't have a homeland in India because my homeland is Rawalpindi and Jhelum, right? So it's a bizarre situation, but also I feel very at home in every single Gurdwara I go to anywhere in the world, So, but for someone like me, carrying the struggles of my parents and people as migrants, I always balance with the celebration of our achievements and how I'm a product of all of that struggle, but also I've achieved. And I want to make films that give a nod to the colonial legacy and the past, that makes us be where we are today, but at the same time celebrate who we are. And that is a very important part of my process, because living in Britain and in the entertainment business in Britain, normally we're put in boxes where the films that get attention are films where we're seen as victims or where we're struggling, and that's the definition of who we are. So my films are sometimes sort of avowedly feel good, celebratory, to combat that kind of disproportionate stereotyping. But what I try and do is sort of honor, I mean, basically, I'm a typical Indian in that what I do is always try and make my parents proud and my parents happy. That's what we do, right? So everything I do, I honor their legacy at the same time, try and make films looking to the future for my children. So my children feel empowered at knowing their great history and knowing how to deal with people trying to put you in boxes, and to break out of those boxes and be empowered and feel empowered. So ultimately, my films, I feel, are always very empowering for whoever's watching them.
There's definitely assertion to them. As a woman, as a proud Indian, there is a deep affinity with the films and work that you produce.
Thank you.
But Anushka, are your parents proud of you now that you have done this great collaboration with Gurinder?
They haven't watched the film yet. They're going to see it tomorrow at the premiere, so we'll see. But I think just the way that I have been influenced by Gurinder's film, so have they. I think it's all ages and generations. And in fact, I think they met Gurinder last month and they just rewatched Bended before that, and they were amazed as to how it's still 23 years later was as entertaining and still stood the test of time. So absolutely.
And what other projects do you want to greenlight in your studio? Are they mostly women-led or women-led narratives?
We do a mix. We definitely try to support women-led narratives, underrepresented groups and ethnicities. A big area for us of expansion over the coming year is actually climate media work. We find that a lot of the climate change content we consume, whether it's in films and series or digital, social media content, is very doomsday, is very, it sort of paralyzes you into inaction rather than gives you hope to act. So we've started to create a whole new media ecosystem around climate media, and most of the things that we're creating, producing ourselves. So it's kids content, rural radio. We have launched 2 new funds basically to provide grants to influencers and to studios and producers to do climate messaging in their content. And we've got philanthropists from the UK and India putting funds into that pool. So we're trying to do this in a more collaborative way. And women are a very important part of that, because very often women are the most vulnerable communities affected by these sorts of changes.
Gurinder, I have to ask, and this is my last question. Is the Uganda angle a nod to Mira and Zohran?
No, because she came there years later. The expulsion was 1972, obviously, and Mira's beautiful love story with her husband happened a little later. But it's wonderful that she's there and that she and her husband love the country so much, as does her son. And I remember after she had her health scare, she praised the doctors in Uganda and said if it wasn't for the doctors, she wouldn't be here. They were so wonderful. So I think her love of the country is wonderful, and again, being an Indian from Delhi who's lived and worked in the States and has a home in Africa, it's just a great testament to, how the future is exactly this, the movement of peoples and the cultures of people and that whole diaspora sensibility. That is the future. And I think one of the things that I'm super proud of is that all my work gets studied in universities, all over the world for precisely that cultural situation. And now with Christmas Karma, every poor kid around the world who has to study Dickens at school, we'll have another version to pore over and compare and contrast. And actually, ironically, I didn't think of that at the time, but now I feel super proud of that because it means that, our history and colonial history, which is no longer taught in schools in Britain, kids have no idea about why Indians are in Britain in the first place. This will be an eye-opener for kids in school. And wow, what a great way to subvert the empire.
You have to rush, I'm told. So lovely chatting with you. Good luck for the film's release in India and looking forward to more of your work. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thanks so much.
Bye.